Moriden Athluan.
The story of his near single-handed assault on Windhelm and his execution of the traitor Ulrich Stormcloak of Windhelm are staples of the Imperial Legion. His devotion to duty, his zeal in combat, his dedication to the safety of the Empire and its citizens are told to all new recruits of the Legion.
Though his actions in the Civil War were what drew the eyes of all Tamriel to him, it is not what he is best known for. No, for it was after his days in the Legion that he began to show his true dedication to both the gods and the people of the Empire.
Come now and hear the tale of the Moriden Athluan's glorious mercenary days, and the great good that he did for all the people of Skyrim.
The bards can
worked
always
the
be
gods'
trusted
names.
to take a story and turn it to their own ends. There are elements of truth to their story. The truth, though, the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. Seven Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. I have no beliefs in the gods to speak of, but I know Lydia does. So for her, I will say the words. Today, a new warrior joins the ranks of Sovngarde. Let all who see these words know that Lydia, housecarl of Thane Moriden Athluan, and noble warrior of Whiterun Hold, fell in combat today against the bandits of Silent Moon's camp. I'm not even entirely sure how or when it happened. We were ambushed somehow as we traveled westward just north of a giant camp, several of them coming from nowhere. At first it seemed we were handling it well. The first few minutes were pure chaos, but neither of us took any major wounds as we fended them off back to back. Indeed, I'd thought we were clear. The last bandit had fallen beneath my blade, and I took a small moment to get my breath back, then turned to find her on the ground, lifeless. My best guess from the large wound through her belly was that one of them, armed with a bladed polearm of some kind, ran her through from behind. That bandit lay on the ground nearby, also lifeless. So she did not go quietly. Of course, she wouldn't. I didn't have time to get to know her as well as I likely should have. But I will miss her wit and instruction. It seems I will have to figure things out myself going forward. Rest well, Lydia. I hid her body for the moment. I'll take it back to Whiterun with me when I am done dealing with these marauders. The rest of the approach was troublesome, to say the least. Alerted by the sounds of battle, many of their remaining forces were already on alert, their patrolling even more attentive. Even so, I managed first to get to the palisade walls on the west side, and then, slowly, made my way up into the first tower. It gave a nice view of the rest of the camp, and was a perfect place to start picking them off. The two on the watchtowers fell first, which alerted the remaining ones even more, of course, but since the bodies had fallen from their towers, they had no idea where the shots were coming from. One or two got some idea, or maybe they were just guessing, and got close enough that I had to hide in the tower itself until they were out of view of the others, before killing them with the blade Tullius had given me. It was a long day of cat and mouse, predator and prey. I'm sorry, Lydia. This kind of hunt I find to be far more thrilling than your ideas of close-quarters combat. With the bandits in the exterior part of the camp eliminated, and oh, how I enjoyed killing that last one, I took a look at the forge that the camp is built around. There was a book there, one filled with the musings of their smith who was trying to understand why this forge was different from others in the province. He hadn't had much luck, though, and my quick read told me that much of his musings are beyond my ability to understand. I would need months of work at the forge to understand most of it, I'm sure. With the forge looked at, I turned to the camp's interior, where I was more certain the object of my search would be located. A ring. Such a small thing, for so much trouble. The inner portions of the ruin did not have many bandits left, 4 by my count, all of them now singing praises to Lydia's name in Sovngarde. If you believe in that kind of thing. The storeroom held a great deal of goods, most of them food, which makes sense for a bandit group. The few valuables they had, I took, which included a ring that from the description Auryen gave me is the one I've been looking for. Pretty enough, I suppose. And its supposed enchantments aren't much to sneer at either, but still, such a small thing to have so high a price attached to it. Of course, it was Lydia and the bandits who paid it, not me. I started the long walk back to Whiterun, picking up Lydia's body on the way. She should be interred with whatever honor her beliefs require, after all. That night, at the Bannered Mare, I did something I have never before done in a tavern. I deliberately called everyone's attention to myself. Though I had already left the body with the whole of the dead before coming here, Lydia was still much on my mind. As her Thane, I was supposed to protect her as much as she was to protect me, I think. I'm still not entirely clear on that point, actually, but I felt it should have been if it wasn't. So I called the tavern's attention, ordering a raising of the glass for Lydia, a last send-off, before she was laid to rest in the Hall of the Dead. As everyone else drank the mead I paid for, I slowly poured my own out upon the fire. May you find rest in whatever afterlife you believe in, Lydia.
8 Frostfall, Thera 201. I dropped into Dragon's Reach the next morning to inform the Jarl of my housecarl's passing, and to look into purchasing the home previously offered. I found him, along with the steward, the captain of the guard, Irilith, and another of the thanes in the balcony war room. Though the war itself was over, there were still many Stormcloak holdouts, it appeared, and they were discussing the possibility of lending some of the guard to the legions. So much for the legions not having a use for me. More likely, the general was afraid I was going to overshadow his victory with my own accomplishments. The home was still available, and I had finally saved up the funds needed. Breeze home is now mine. As much as I find the Bannered Mare a serviceable inn and tavern, you can only feel comfortable spending that much a night for so long. I've never owned a home before. It is an odd feeling, I must admit. I will be taking a break from my travels today to both get settled in at my new home and work on some of my secondary skill sets. My armor in particular is starting to show a lot of wear and needs repair, or better, updating, if I can manage it. I learned more of steel and hammer. I gleaned more of alchemical interactions and potion potency. I bashed my way into the proper usage of the shield. All of that in the rain. Because this is Whiterun, so of course it was raining. I feel that where the smithy is concerned, I am right on the verge of a breakthrough, but it is just eluding me. Once I do, though, I think there may be a whole new armor set in my future, something more advanced, tougher, less prone to wear. Perhaps something drawing on the oldest of Mer legends for its aesthetic. But that is still in the future, it seems. My time in the practice yard was far more fruitful, not because I learned much, though I did, but more because it let me vent my remaining frustrations. Yesterday was hard, though I never thought it would be. I look forward to getting back on the road and putting this whole event behind me. I closed out the day with an inspection of my new home, complete with a new set of furnishings provided by the Hold. Really, that means it was set up and purchased by the steward based on his tastes, not mine. But as it is my first home ever, furnished or no, I wasn't going to complain. It is all serviceable enough, and I admit that the thought of sleeping in a bed that countless travelers before have not been in before me is appealing, on many levels. I may have to see about employing someone to freshen the place up every so often, as I won't be here often myself. It's a thought for later. Tomorrow it is back on the road for Riften, and the final artifact Auryen needs. And more bandits. Always more bandits. 9 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. The day passed quietly in travel. I took the pass over the north portion of the throat of the world before passing through Iverstead and walking the south road to Riften. For the most part, the weather was clear, though it turned to rain just as I was rounding the southern portion of Lake Honrick. The Bee and Barb was in its usual state, every customer staring at every other customer, and then checking their purse to make sure it was still present. I spent a small amount of time narrowing down the location of Broken Helm Hollow, the reported location of the bandits who have taken the hammer I'm looking for. I still wonder how Auryen is getting all this information, but since it's proven correct so far, I'm not going to question it too much just yet. 10 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. Since catching bandits when they are at their most tired has, in the past, been a tried and true method to ensure that combat with them turns out more or less as I would prefer, I woke early to arrive at their hideout just as dawn was breaking. The 2 sentries missed me entirely, only realizing I was present when the first died. The second, in a panic, charged in the direction the arrow had come from, and thus set herself up for similar treatment. Inside, I expect I will find sleeping criminals, which, if I do things right, may not change except in the expected length of their naps. These bandits follow the ancient thumb rules of rising early, which is a new thing in my experience. All were already awake, though not entirely aware, when I entered the cave. 2 died almost immediately from arrow fire, 2 more when I called up my spirit walk ability and had to face the ghosts of my ancestors, And the last I killed in melee combat with a new toy I picked up in Whiterun before I left. Someone actually had an axe of ebony on sale, and though it cost me a fair bit, I had the funds. Turns out, now that I've used it, it is very sharp. The hammer I sought was behind a badly hidden secret door, but that wasn't the only thing I found. Another body, a local from the looks of him. The bandits had him chained to a wall originally and were using him for close-range target practice or a living training dummy. He didn't survive the experience. Oddly, they hadn't taken everything on his body, or perhaps thought that the note wasn't worth taking, but it mentioned his name, Leifnir, and his home on the west shores of Lake Honrick. I'll be heading back that way soon, so I think I can make a brief stop there to deliver the news. Closure on things like this can be very important. Before I can leave Riften, though, I have one last thing to try. I have found nothing but contradictions in those who follow the gods thus far. In Whiterun, the priestess of Kinnereth would have me commit the equivalent of an eternal atrocity to restore a tree to life, rather than find blessed renewal. In Markarth, the priestesses of the goddess of beauty showed the ugly side of their own natures in what amounted to a kidnapping with consent. Although I once mentioned that the only thing that people love in Riften is money, I must still give Mara's temple a chance to show me that there is, in fact, some merit in dedicating oneself to the gods. This is the last chance, really. There are no other temples to a given god here, though the Temple of the Eight in Solitude supposedly caters to them all. I'm leery of that, however. Serve one, and you are dedicated. Serve all, and you serve none, I think. The Temple of Mara was different from the other two temples, larger, I think, and certainly with more worshippers than priests or priestesses. There was a level of comfort to it that I had not sensed in the other two temples, which is a point in its credit, and the statue of Mara. There was something eerily familiar about it, as though I had seen it in another life somehow. Shaking that off, I spoke first with the head priest Maramul. His explanation of Mara's purpose actually made some sense, and explained why the temple was in Riften instead of Whiterun or Solitude. Its mission is to serve the downtrodden, the poor, the sick, the weak, all of which Riften has in spades, and, short of major upheaval, will for the foreseeable future. It was the under-priestess Dunya that I spent the most time conversing with. Some of what she said seemed the kind of garbled half-truths I could get anywhere, but there were two things she said that made a lot of sense. First, that to know love as Mara does, you have to have spread it. Know it to feel it, in a way. That made sense, which led to her giving me a task. A vision from Mara had shown her a young woman in Iverstead who had been praying to Mara. I think I know the girl, and girl is closer to the mark, I think, from passing comments. She seeks to see the world, and her father seeks to keep her on the farm. Regardless, I am to go to Iverstead and answer this prayer. Iverstead is as good a place to go as any at the moment, though I'll need to get back to Solitude in the near future. For now, though, a good enough reason to visit it in more depth. Plus, that still will allow me to deliver the news about Leifnir on my way by. Heartwood Mill is a small place on the west side of the lake, kept in business mostly by its nearby neighbor, the Flying Knight Inn. It is also the former home of Leifnir, the man whose body I found in the bandit cave of Broken Helm Hollow. I met with his widow only briefly, long enough to pass on the news. She was moderately devastated, beating herself up for thinking he was being unfaithful to her rather than actually going out to look for him. and as quickly as that she seemed to be over it. Love works very oddly in Skyrim, it seems. But I've been figuring that out since my talk with Maramol. Every single couple got married in Riften. Seems like a racket to me. I just can't see the people of Solitude journeying over 40 miles over 3 or 4 days just to have a priest say something over their heads. Never mind having to then do the same thing just to get home. That might, however, go a long way to explaining why so many couples aren't even married in Skyrim. Next door to the mill is the infamous Flying Knight Inn. I've heard stories about this place, about its borderline insane regulars. A proprietress who loves her whip, old men they say can create magic never seen in Skyrim, even, according to some stories, a troll in the basement kept on a chain. I'll pass. The one thing I know for certain about that place is that you won't find me in it. After a long day of walking, killing bandits, and learning the divine nature of love and charity, I finally arrived in Ivarstead. I may be here on a mission from a god, but if it's waited this long, it will wait another night. I went straight to the inn, where I was introduced to the gullible meanderings of the innkeeper, warning me to stay away from the barrow to the west because it was haunted, and then went straight to bed. I'll deal with this girl's problem in the morning, when I can think straight. 11 Frostfall, 4th Era, 201. I overheard Fastrid's name being spoken as I walked the main street of Ivarstead, really the only street in Ivarstead, and the conversation I listened to confirmed my memory. Fastrid is the daughter of 2 farmers, a mother who seems more inclined to allow her child to explore and see some of the world, and a father who is as overprotective as any I've seen. Listening to him speak, though, I don't think this is out of love for her, though he likely thinks it is. He's afraid to lose her. It isn't bandits or scoundrels or anything else he gives as reasons not to let her go. It's the idea that she may choose not to come back. That isn't love for a child. That's fear for yourself and how you see the world being. I haven't talked to Fastrid yet, of course, but if she is of relatively sound mind, then I can't see supporting her father in keeping her here. The province is, despite the war and the bandit population, sparsely populated. Having her world limited to just this village would be a disservice to both the province and her, especially if the men I've seen in this town were the only ones she had to pick and choose from. Given the age differences, they may as well be marrying a child. Stories make love between people sound simple. You meet a person, you fall in love, you live out your life happy. That's not how it usually goes, but it is how we romanticize it. In Fastrid's eyes, things are simple. She believes herself to be in love with a young man who, after they marry, wants to move to Riften. This is simple enough. She may be right, she may be wrong, but no matter what she chooses, someone is going to get hurt. Her father believes she's just chasing a dream, that her fancy is just going to drive her to a bad decision that takes her away from the home that he loves and wants to see continue. Even mentioned that just a month ago it was some other young man she had her eyes on. Her mother, on the other hand, likes the current object of her affections and is more than willing to run interference if the two of them were to make a run for it. According to her, the only reason they haven't is because, in public, she backs her husband's words. It's a right mess. But there is something to be gained from the entire exchange. Fastrid knew I was coming. Said that after her prayer to Mara 2 days ago, that she was told a stranger would come to solve her problems. Well, that part at least seems to be true. So maybe Mara does take a more direct hand. But if this is the kind of emotional destruction I would have to sort out every single time one of Martha's worshippers pray for help, count me out.
I'm not even sure what I'm going to do here yet. Both parents think that a little encouragement to one of the men that Fastred has been interested in would be enough to resolve the situation. There is power in a choice, and the choice has been given to me. That being the case, I decided not to decide. Yet. Instead, I wanted to talk to both of the young men in question, starting with Fastred's current infatuation, Basanius. I think it is safe to say he did not impress me much in the brief minutes I spoke with him at the Vielmeer Inn. He was rude, abrupt, and centered on little other than his own boredom. Instead of doing anything useful, he has chosen to sit in the inn and do nothing. Well, of course you're bored. And you're doing nothing about it, and if you think that moving to Riften is going to magically change that, you have very little idea of how the world works. Indeed, I have to wonder if the relationship between him and Fastred, from his perspective, is anything more than a welcome diversion from his own self-made boredom. Clemic was a very different kind of fish. I had to wait for him to finish a conversation with another of the men of the village, but that conversation told me several things about him. That he is established, that he has a work ethic, and that he is generally a kind person. Not everyone would make the trip up to High Hrothgar every few weeks to deliver food for no pay or favors. He is a fair bit older than Fastred, but that isn't something that can't be overcome. On top of all of these things, he genuinely cares for her, I think. When I dropped the suggestion that simply saying something to her, actually communicating in no uncertain terms how he felt about her, he at first wanted to bash my face in. I can forgive this. What man wants another man giving him advice about women unsolicited? When I laid it out for him, however, he paused and was thoughtful. Which means he is also willing to admit he's wrong. A rare trait in many these days. He walked away to speak to Fastred. As he said, what does he have to lose? If he says nothing, he gains nothing, and will most certainly lose everything. Win or lose, at least both will know where they stand. Also, Bassianus was a jerk. I watched from a distance as Clemic spoke with Fastred. From what I heard, she really was still hung up on the older man. It certainly didn't take her long to pull a hard about on Bassianus. This, I think, will work out for them. Dad will be happy his little girl is still in Iverstead. Mom won't care who her daughter is with, as long as Fastred is happy and content. And I think that Clemic will gladly take Fastred out to see the world on occasion if she really wants it. The only one missing out here, I think, is Bassianus. That being the case, nothing of importance is lost. With that taken care of, I have a task now. I've already decided that Mara is not going to be something I can dedicate to. It is simply not something I can do. That means that the gods are not for me, it seems. At least, not as a worshipper. There are, however, other ways to find enlightenment and purpose, one of which I have been ignoring for weeks. Not only might it be something to give me purpose, but it may also be a path to power the likes of which nobody on Nirn can attain. The Greybeards. I'd already agreed to take Clemic's weekly portion of dried foods up to High Hrothgar, and they did invite me to come by rather loudly. The walk up the 7,000 steps was long, hard, and cold. I hadn't started my ascent until afternoon, so while it started off warm enough, it quickly became near to freezing, then actually freezing, long before I reached the top. The Greybeards really like their solitude, it seems. I did, however, learn a great deal about them as part of the journey, which may also be part of their intent. And it made it very clear the connection between the voice and dragons was a firm and unbreakable one.
The story, as relayed by 10 small shrines along the way, is a simple one. First came the dragons, then came man. Dragons thought man would make great slaves, not to mention late-night snacks. Understandably, man did not care for this, especially the snack part, too much. They appealed to Kine, who worked with someone called Parthenax. Why do I hear the word snack in this name? To give the dragon language to man. The voice, or ability to shout. Man got all fired up about this, and fought the dragons, eventually shouting a dragon called Alduin out of existence. If that were the entire story, I would have respect for those who followed this way that they found. Power is always respected. This, however, is where the story takes a turn. Man, as you might expect, created their first empires, and the dragons faded from existence. Those who could use this power tried to use it to conquer, and faced off with some enemy at Red Mountain, as best I can tell, and failed utterly to win. This prompted one of them, Jürgen Windcaller, to think about why that was, spending 7 years in meditation. When he came back and refused to speak on the insights he had gained, others tried to shout him down. They did as well at that as they had at the mountain, which proved that Windcaller was likely onto something. He found it high Hrothgar at the throat, and swore to speak only at need. In short, he and his followers gave up their power. A waste. Not sure I'll care for their teachings. Though the hour was somewhat late, I was expected, it seems. 4 of the Greybeards stood waiting for me in the antechamber in total silence, until I was close enough that one of them would be able to speak to me in a whisper that, against the almost supernatural silence of the room, sounded far louder than it actually was. Auryen did not waste time, welcoming me, and then telling me to prove that I was the Dragonborn they had summoned. "Let us taste of your voice," he said. I paused for a moment, and then I shrugged and pushed him and the others onto the floor with this shouting thing I've been experimenting with. Or rather, that's what I tried to do. They stayed on their feet rather well, and instead of being upset, seemed genuinely pleased that I had just tried to shout them across the room. Auryen became far more open, and we started discussing just what exactly I was. Obviously, I was not the first of the dragon blood. There have been many, even aside from Talos. What he did say, however, was that as far as they were aware, I was the only one at the current time. Ulfric sprang to mind, of course. I mentioned him, and they nodded as if expecting the question. He had studied for quite some time to be able to use the voice. This is the difference between simple study and what I am able to do. I learn it so quickly because, in a way, I already know it. I just have to create the right situation for it to be unlocked in my mind. I wasn't sure what that meant just yet, but I was to find out in very short order. He had a small speech about dedication and willingness to follow the path laid out before me, but this sounded more like the standard mystical double talk most priests engage in, which I suppose makes them a priesthood of sorts. This one, though, this one contains real power. My instruction began with the basics. What a shout was. I wasn't wrong about the words on the stone walls. Each of them is a word of power in the dragon language, one that, because of my dragon blood, I instinctively can learn. That is the first part, knowing a word. Except that a full shout is 3 words, each one building on the rest to create a more powerful effect. So naturally, they wanted me to show how quickly I could learn a word. One of the Greybeards did something, and a word appeared on the ground before me. I was told what it would be, but they still wanted me to stare at it. So I did. The second part I almost already knew. The concepts, words, and disorientation I had been experiencing every time I killed a dragon was my mind reaching into the creature and seeking knowledge and understanding of these words. Even when I didn't have a word to pair that understanding with, I was doing it anyhow, storing away the knowledge until I had a word to pair with. When I have both, then I can use the word in a shout, and I can do it in minutes. If the information I need is all there, as opposed to the years or decades of practice the Greybeards, or Ulfric, required to do the same thing. They also demonstrated this ability, allowing me to take hold of one of the Master's understandings of the second word of a shout they called Unrelenting Force. The energy surge was already familiar, but this time only a single concept seemed to float in the air around me, making it easy to grasp hold of, make my own. I could feel the word and concept click together, giving each other power, and then combining with the word I already knew to make it even more powerful as well. After that, they had me do target practice, shouting apart images that were almost ghosts to prove I had mastered the first concept they'd given me. The power felt good. Right. I was beginning to feel like some kind of a performer in a traveling show. Do this, do that, now shout at these things, now those things. Finally, though, they got tired of having me shout them around and took me to the back courtyard. It was cold, it was getting dark, my patience was getting a little thin, so when the next stage of this show started with them wanting to see how quickly I could learn a word from an entirely new shout, I almost screamed at them. Well, almost shouted. I did, however, as they asked. If a little more patience would be the key to power here, then I could pretend to have it a little longer. I learned and absorbed the knowledge of the first word of Whirlwind Sprint, and then promptly demonstrated it by running over one of the Greybeards getting through a gate before they could close it. Oops. They either thought it an accident or chose to overlook it. Satisfied now, finally, I should say, that I was indeed a Dragonborn, they set me a final task, one they said would cement in my mind the proper use of the voice. Given what I've read today, and from the way they treat this ability as something to be used only in extreme circumstances, by which I mean never, I rather doubt it. Indeed, they seem to worship the idea of the voice, though they mask it as a form of worshipping the gods. Worshipping them by never speaking, by never using the power given us by them, supposedly, to change the world we have been given dominion over. This is madness. No, if my short life has shown me anything, it is that those with power must use that power, lest others who have it try to take it from you. I kept this observation to myself, however. Until I know more, can use this power better, it would be folly to alienate these old men. Learn everything I can first. Then I will choose to what end I will use this. I will not allow anyone to turn their back on me, to abandon me again.